Whatever you're doing, this video will be more fun. Indulge in these 6 extraordinary alien encounters. These captivating accounts will keep you on the edge of your seat. Welcome to this thrilling episode. Stick around for our most gripping stories yet. Enjoy. Story 1. Hi, I'm Johan. After watching your video about the strange experience the couple Marlies and John had on the south coast of South Africa, I felt compelled to share my own story. Back in the early 1990s, I often explored the mountains of the Western Cape province of South Africa. Me, my brother, and our spouses were often seeking adventure and new experiences. One particular hike stands out as a particularly strange and memorable experience. It was just the 4 of us, myself, my wife Cecile, my brother Rudolph, and his wife Mariska. We embarked on a hike up a remote creek on a farm nestled in one of the lesser populated valleys of the region. Our goal was to reach a cave high up in the creek known for its ancient Khoisan rock paintings. We were eager to view the paintings and explore the depths of the cave, which was rumored to be largely unexplored, with its true depths unknown. Because that entire section of the mountain is on private land, very few people have ever ventured up there. The farm has been in one family for many generations, and the story within their family is that the creek is haunted. Accessing the creek is not easy. One must navigate through a narrow valley, which is an offshoot of the main valley. This small valley, which the farmer did not cultivate, was a beautiful, natural environment. This valley eventually narrows into a creek with many boulders and rock pools acting as obstructions. As you ascend further, it becomes even narrower and climbs at a steeper angle as it winds through the mountain. Getting to the creek was hard enough, but going up it was said to be quite arduous and sometimes perilous. The creek was thus truly remote and difficult to access. We were granted special permission from the owner to explore the creek, although he warned us that his family hadn't ventured up there for at least 3 decades due to strange occurrences. He was reluctant to elaborate. Among the local people of color, there is a tale passed down from their forefathers, the Khoi people, a group similar to the San people of the Kalahari. They believed that the creek was a sacred place where rituals were performed and sacrifices were made to the ancestral spirits who resided there. On the Friday night, we set up camp in the narrow, uncultivated valley before the creek, preparing for our hike up the creek the next day. On the Saturday, the weather was scorching hot, typical of summer days in the region. Despite the heat, the brook running down the creek had enough water to form several deep, cascading pools as we ventured further upstream. The creek itself was a marvel to behold, with steep walls rising up like upright cliffs. Along its course, the water formed numerous rock pools, each one incredibly deep. To continue our journey up the creek, we had to swim through these to then climb up rocks only to get to the next pool and so on. The environment within the creek was like stepping into a different world. With only a few short hours of the scorching African sun shining directly into the creek each day, the flora was lush and vibrant. Cape Dizes, with their bright red flowers, clung to the rock faces, adding splashes of color to the green foliage and ferns that adorned the cliffs. The constant trickle of water created a cool, moist atmosphere, shielding us from the sweltering summer heat outside the creek's confines. We were about 1/3 into the creek when we had a rather disturbing experience. We were suddenly startled by a piercing, high-pitched sound that seemed to reverberate through the air. It was so intense that it hurt our ears, and at the same time, our hair stood on end as if we were electrically charged. It was a bizarre sensation, leaving us feeling confused and concerned. We couldn't pinpoint the source of the noise or understand what could be causing this strange electrical sensation. This unsettling experience lasted for about 30 seconds, and we were somewhat relieved when it abruptly stopped, our hair returning to its normal state. However, our relief was short-lived as the same thing happened again, only this time the noise was even more intense and excruciatingly painful. It felt like it would never end, though it only lasted for about a minute and leaving us thoroughly shaken. My brother and his wife were particularly disturbed by the experience and insisted on returning to the camp. Despite the unnerving experience with the strange noise, Cecile and I were determined to press on. We had our hearts set on reaching the cave, fueled by our love for adventure as a couple. However, I couldn't deny that the eerie atmosphere and the unsettling sensation lingered in the air. Meanwhile, Rudolph and Mariska seemed thoroughly spooked. We reached a tentative agreement to continue a bit further, but if the noise were to start again, they insisted on turning back. As we trudged on for another 10 minutes or so, tension hung heavy in the air. Then, Cecile spotted something unusual, a trio of figures standing on a flat rock about 50 meters ahead of us. The sight of those figures sent a shiver down our spines. They bore a striking resemblance to the so-called gray aliens often depicted in popular media, although they appeared taller than the typical portrayal. Standing there, about a foot shorter than the average person, they emanated an eerie presence with their large black eyes and grayish skin adorned with strange green patterns. It was as if they were staring right through us, and we were frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. Mariska pleaded with Rudolph to turn back, her fear palpable in the tense silence that enveloped us. The sight of those beings brought us to a standstill, Mariska's pleas urging us to retreat ringing in our ears. Despite our trembling fear, Cecile and I were overcome with curiosity. She reached for her camera, but something compelled her to return it to her rucksack, a strange sensation coursing through us all. As one of the beings raised its arm, we felt an intense telepathic message urging us to turn back and return to our camp. It was a sensation so powerful that we obeyed without hesitation, pivoting in unison and retracing our steps. With each glance backward, the figures remained perched on the rock, their piercing stares following us until they faded from view. Once out of sight, we remained silent, each lost in our own thoughts, shaken by the eerie encounter. We hurried back to base camp, our resolve to stay another night evaporating in the wake of the unsettling encounter. We packed up hastily, leaving the remote valley behind us. We shared our experience with only a select few, knowing that others would dismiss us as crazy. In the years since, Cecile and I have often pondered the incident, wondering about the identity and purpose of those mysterious beings. However, I have to accept that we will never have answers to our questions. It has crossed our minds to revisit the creek, but I subsequently found out that the farmer has since passed away, and his son, who inherited the property, no longer allows hikers on the farm. Regards, Johan. Story 2. Howdy. We've been ranching cattle in Montana for 30 years. On a 2,000-acre spread, we raise top-notch Angus beef. Life's typically quiet and simple. Recently, though, we've had troubling events on the ranch. A few months ago, while checking the herd, I found a dead cow in the pasture. Initially, I suspected a predator, but closer inspection revealed a gruesome scene. The cow was mutilated. Parts were cut out. These were very neat, clean cuts. No blood was present, which unnerved me. I've seen my share of dead animals, but never anything like this. I was puzzled and a bit scared. Who or what could be responsible? After the initial incident, things worsened. Every few weeks, another cow would be found mutilated in the same eerie manner. Eyes, tongues, and other parts were missing. Surgical cuts, no blood. This pattern extended to the neighboring farms, leaving us all terrified and questioning. In all, only 4 farms were affected. My neighbors and I speculated about everything from cult activity to government experiments. One even mentioned aliens, though at first the rest of us dismissed the latter as absurd. Despite vigilant nighttime surveillance, no culprit could be found. We became fearful. It felt like we were being watched. One morning, after finding another cow mutilated, I noticed strange marks around the carcass. Odd patterns in the dirt, not hoof prints or tire tracks. Nearby, some sticky substance on the ground, strange color, almost glowing. I couldn't recognize it from the farm. The sheriff took samples, but no word back. The whole thing was getting very weird. We were feeling helpless, unable to explain or protect our livestock. One night, it got stranger. Out checking on the animals, I saw unusual lights in the sky. Not like stars or planes. They moved oddly, changing colors. Strange sounds followed, starting as a low electrical hum, then louder and unsettling. Not familiar machinery or animals. Felt like it came from everywhere, making my neck hairs stand up. I tried following lights and sounds, but they kept moving, like a game. I couldn't figure it out, and it left me uneasy. My farm felt unfamiliar. I couldn't shake what I'd seen and heard. I was consumed by my thoughts day and night. I simply had to uncover the truth. I stayed up late, watched the skies, walked the fields for clues. My neighbors resigned to the phenomena and said I should do the same, but I couldn't. My farm was getting hit at a much higher rate than theirs. Each of them had only lost 1 cow by the time I lost 4. The sheriff advised me to focus on ranching, but I refused to let it go. I felt he was not doing his job. This was my livelihood. I needed answers. I set up cameras and motion sensors, but they only captured mundane activity and sometimes static. One night, everything changed. The lights appeared brighter and closer. I felt a strange pull, compelled to investigate. This time it was hovering very close to my house. Against my better judgment, I approached it. Suddenly, everything went dark. I felt a cold grip on my body, like invisible hands holding me tight. I couldn't move or shout. The next thing I knew, I was inside some kind of room. It was filled with bright lights and strange noises. I couldn't understand what was happening, but I could feel a presence all around me. I saw figures moving, but they didn't look human. They were tall and thin with big, dark eyes. I couldn't speak or move, just watch in horror as they did things I can't even describe. At some point, I passed out. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, on a field somewhere on a neighbor's farm. It felt like I'd been gone for hours, but it was still the middle of the night. My watch was broken, and my head was pounding. I was terrified and confused. My body ached all over and my mind was racing. I knew I had been taken by something beyond this world, and I didn't know if I'd ever be the same again. I stumbled back to my house, my mind racing. My wife was frantic, saying I'd been gone for hours. She wanted to call the sheriff, but what could I say? That I'd been taken by aliens? Who would believe that? Days went by, and I tried to piece together what happened, but my memories were jumbled. Like a bad dream, I couldn't quite remember. There were flashes of light, strange faces, and cold metal tables. I knew something terrible had happened, but it was like trying to remember smoke. I tried to go back to my normal life, but nothing felt the same. I kept looking over my shoulder, afraid they'd come back. After my abduction, the cattle mutilation stopped, but the fear didn't. I still don't know the reason they took me, the things they did to me. I don't know if they have taken anyone else from around here. I'm too ashamed to mention it to anyone. I'll never forget that night. I just hope sharing my story helps someone else. Maybe if enough of us speak out, we can figure out what's really going on. Regards, Anonymous. Story 3. Hey there, I'm going to go by June for this letter. It's actually my middle name and hardly anyone knows me by it. Consider it my pen name for the sake of your listeners. I know my story might sound a little odd, but I believe your viewers might find it intriguing. 10 years back, I bid farewell to the hustle and bustle of Los Angeles and headed for rural Oregon. I needed a break from the city grind. Just me, a single woman in her mid-50s seeking solace. Ever since my teenage years, I've been haunted by these unsettling nightmares. It's like I'm snatched from my bed by strange beings, subjected to terrifying examinations. I'm always paralyzed in these dreams, helpless to fight back. They faded away in my early 20s, only to resurface in my late 40s. My therapist diagnosed me with PTSD, a result of the turbulent childhood I endured. My parents' bitter divorce, the relentless bullying at school, and the weight of failed relationships. It all took its toll on me. Settling down in Oregon marked a fresh chapter in my life. I snagged a spacious plot of land just a mile outside town, nestled amidst serene woods. It's a picturesque community, a haven of tranquility. I was starting anew. Leaving behind my thriving beauty salon in LA, I launched a new venture in my newfound hometown. Things seemed to fall into place smoothly. My house, an elegant old structure, underwent a makeover, adding to the charm of my new life. Initially, the nightmares faded into the background. Life felt less burdensome. Yet 2 years in, the dreams returned with a vengeance. Doubts crept in. Was this fresh start fueling its own anxieties? The nightmares grew more frequent, more vivid. Desperate for answers, I turned to a local psychologist, but her explanations felt like rehearsed lines. Lifelong therapy for childhood trauma. It didn't add up. How could my parents' issues manifest as encounters with unearthly beings? It seemed far-fetched. Feeling like I needed a change, I decided to explore a different avenue. There was talk of a hypnotherapist in town, and I figured, why not give it a shot? It was uncharted territory for me, but I was willing to try anything at that point. So, I agreed to a regression session. Let me tell you, what unfolded during those sessions was beyond anything I could have imagined. It's hard to put into words, really. I know it might sound outlandish, but bear with me. Under hypnosis, I unearthed memories of being abducted by aliens since I was just a kid. Yeah, you heard that right. Abducted by extraterrestrial beings. They'd whisk me away to their craft and subject me to all sorts of unsettling examinations and experiments. It was downright agonizing. The hypnotherapist urged me to embrace whatever emerged during these sessions, to not question it but to explore it. And each time I delved deeper, more details surfaced. It was like peeling back layers of a nightmare I'd buried deep within my subconscious. Needless to say, it took a toll on me. I felt like I was spiraling into a crisis. So I upped my sessions, seeing him twice a week for 2 weeks in a row. And just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, they did. It was a typical weeknight, not particularly chilly, but the rain outside added an eerie touch to the darkness. I was just about ready to hit the hay when there came a knock at the front door. Odd, I thought to myself. Peeking through the peephole, I saw no one. Weird, right? As I turned to walk away, there came another knock. Now, our neighborhood's pretty tight-knit, so I figured it must be some neighborly shenanigans. The local teenagers sometimes get up to harmless mischief. I crept back to the door, aiming to unlock it as quietly as possible. My plan? To catch whoever it was in the act and play along with their little game. I mean, why not inject a bit of humor into the situation, right? But when I flung open the door, I was met with quite the sight. Before me stood a man in the crispest white suit I'd ever laid eyes on. It wasn't your ordinary suit, though. It had that Nehru style, with the closed-up collar and no tie. But there was something peculiar about it, like a modern take on the classic. It lacked buttons but was impeccably closed in front. And the man himself, well, he was a towering figure, easily reaching 7 feet tall. His hair was the lightest shade of blonde, his eyes a piercing blue. He practically radiated with an otherworldly presence, if you catch my drift. Now, I'm not one to open my door to strangers, mind you. Nobody ever showed up here unannounced before, but there I was, standing face to face with this peculiar fella, and something about him just calmed my nerves right down. His lips didn't even twitch, but I swear I heard a voice in my head saying, "You have nothing to fear, I am here to help." Strange, huh? Against my better judgment, I went ahead and invited him inside. Looking back, I can't believe I did that. He made his way into the foyer while I locked the door out of pure habit, leaving the key dangling in the lock. My house layout's a bit peculiar, with the lounge off to the left as you enter. I was expecting him to follow me, but he just stood there, staring at me with those piercing eyes. "I am here to help," he repeated, and it clicked. I knew exactly what he meant. This time his words were spoken out loud in English, albeit with a strange accent. It reminded me a little bit of this Persian hairstylist I once knew in LA, how that fella spoke. Yet he sure did not look like he was from those parts. Unusually tall, fair-skinned, with a presence that radiated a feeling of caring. I just stood there, not uttering a word as he continued on. "They have not paid you a visit since your youth. Mark the moment, for they are coming back. A year from now, they will return." My heart sank. He was talking about my abductors. Then he revealed more in a style that seemed as strange as his appearance. It sounded almost like riddles. I have the words etched into my memory. "You need 2 guardians, creatures of the sort called dogs," he said, his voice serious. Then he carried on. "2 shepherds have a bond. The ones who haunt you cannot pacify those joined in strength. Your village has a shelter for these creatures. 2 are waiting for you. Go tomorrow and bring them home. You have 1 year. Bring your heart to theirs. They must sleep in your room." A quick message from our channel. Your support is vital for our success. By subscribing and hitting the like button, you help us continue bringing you these eerie stories. Your ongoing support means everything to us. Now let's jump back into June's captivating tale. And then he hit me with this. "If the shepherds succumb, turn to prayer. The gray ones will not stand against the call to the higher one." Prayer, I thought. I hadn't practiced religion in decades. But in that moment, his words resonated with me, despite their strangeness. Desperate for answers, I blurted out, "Who are they? Why are they doing this to me?" His response was cryptic. "Explanations cannot do. Nothing you can understand. Their goal is not to harm, but causing terror or not does not concern them. Their manner is the problem." "Why are you helping me?" I fired back. His answer was simple yet profound. "You and I have a connection. They cause too much terror. I am helping you." Before I could inquire further, he said in a gentle, almost childlike tone, "I am thirsty." Realizing I hadn't offered him anything, I hurried off to the kitchen to fetch a glass of water. To my utter surprise, when I returned to the foyer, he was gone. Nowhere in sight, not even in the lounge. I searched the entire house, top to bottom, but there was no trace of him. The front door was still locked, just as I'd left it. And I didn't hear a single creak, not even from the patio doors, which were also locked from the inside. It was a perplexing mystery. He had simply vanished into thin air. Feeling uneasy, I eventually went to bed. The next morning, I called my second-in-command, telling her to take charge of the shop. I wasn't going in. Instead, I headed straight to the local animal shelter. And wouldn't you know it, there they were, just like he said. 2 shepherds with a bond. It was a German shepherd and one of her pups who was already 2 years old. Their previous owner had recently passed away, leaving the loyal companions in need of a new home. Without a moment's hesitation, I knew what I had to do. I adopted both of them on the spot, determined to give them the love and care they deserved. Over the following year, I formed a deep bond with these 2 dogs, Venus and Rex. I spent nearly all my free time with them. They became my constant companions, sleeping by my side every night. I grew incredibly attached to them. I even splurged on an SUV so they could join me on my adventures. We became a family. In addition to my newfound canine companions, I found myself reconnecting with my religious roots. I started praying again, engaging in heartfelt conversations with the Lord. It was my way of reaffirming my faith. It had been about a year since my strange visitor made his presence known. One night, I was jolted awake by a sharp flash of light from outside. Both dogs were on high alert, their senses keenly attuned to something amiss. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed Rex's bared teeth as he growled menacingly, a primal warning to any intruders. My bedroom door was slightly open, granting me a view down the hallway from where I lay in bed. An unsettling sense of approaching danger tingled in the air, sending shivers down my spine. Swiftly, I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest as I fixed my gaze down the corridor. Soon enough, my eyes locked onto what seemed 5 or more looming figures. They stood short in stature, around 4 feet tall, their heads disproportionately large, with large black eyes staring at me and the dogs. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized them from my recurring nightmares, their presence casting an ominous shadow. Dread consumed me as I perceived them not merely as strange visitors, but as an evil threat from the depths of my darkest fears. Fear clawed at my mind, imagining the malevolent deeds they might inflict upon me. Without hesitation, Rex bolted into the hallway, his fur bristling along his back, emphasizing his formidable presence. With a fierce bark and menacing growl, he confronted them. Despite maintaining a cautious distance, he seemed poised to strike. The intruders froze in response, uncertain of their next move. My dread and anxiety intensified as I watched the tense standoff unfold before me, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Venus positioned herself between me and the door, her gaze alternating between the hallway and me, ensuring my safety while remaining ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Her muscles tensed, ready to defend me against any threat that dared to come too close. As Rex stood his ground, she emitted low, guttural growls, echoing his warning to the intruders. The air crackled with tension as the standoff unfolded. The figures hesitated, uncertain of how to proceed in the face of Rex and Venus's fierce defense. Despite their apparent intent, they remained frozen in place, their advance halted by the fearless determination of my loyal companions. Desperate for help, I reached for my mobile only to find it lifeless in my hand. I tried to switch on my bedside lamp, but it too was dead. In my terror, I realized I couldn't wait for the figures to approach Rex and Venus. I began reciting the Lord's Prayer, but halfway through, I found myself simply talking to my Creator, saying, "Look, you and I have become very close. Now is the time I need your help." I said it aloud, holding my hands together in prayer while I stared intently at the figures down the hallway. Then something incredibly strange and amazing happened. I watched as they walked backwards, retreating from the hallway into the foyer until they vanished from sight. The dogs ceased their barking. Rex emitted a few more growls, then fell silent. Suddenly, there were two flashes of light from outside, and the next moment my bedside lamp and mobile phone turned on. I realized I had left them switched on when I tried them earlier, even though they had no power. The dogs still seemed a bit startled, but they were no longer barking or growling. I called the cops. When they arrived, I simply told them there is an intruder. They searched the entire house but found nothing and nobody. There was only me and the dogs. It's been 5 years since that incident. I haven't had any visitations from the abductors or the strange tall white man again. Venus is getting on, and Rex is now 7 years old. Recently, I also adopted 2 Rottweiler puppies, a brother and sister. It's kind of funny, but these days my house is like a kennel. I don't think I'll ever be without dogs again. Anyway, that's my absurd story, and you probably think I'm crazy. But believe me, it really happened. Either that or I am totally crazy. Sincerely, June.
Story 4.
Hi there. A few years back, I worked at an Antarctic expeditionary base. Since then, I have emigrated from my country of birth. Yet, in writing this letter, I must be cautious about sharing information. If I still lived there, I would not be sharing even this sanitized version of the story. Just to be on the safe side, I won't disclose our nation's expedition or specific details. Several nations have bases in Antarctica, most with security personnel for unforeseen events despite no official military presence. I was one of 2 security staff at our nation's Antarctic station, recruited from National Special Forces. It was unusual for someone from our unit to be sent there. My instructions were to keep an eye open for anything strange and support the 2 existing security officers. I was issued auxiliary arms, including 3 automatic combat rifles. The other officer was a scientist with Army training. For the duration of my stay, he would be under my command. We often joined scientific field trips. During a field trip by helicopter to a distant mountain range for rock samples, we encountered a strange disc-shaped craft flying alongside us. Upon landing, it swiftly departed. Upon our return to the base, we reported the incident to the expedition leader, who appeared unsurprised but agitated. 3 days later, during a dark and snowy evening, the radar operator detected something landing near the station. I armed myself and headed out, where I encountered the expedition leader, who indicated the visitors were there to meet with him. I objected, demanding to know about the visitors, but he avoided the question. Insisting on following, I stayed about 10 meters behind him as we ventured into the storm. We encountered 2 strange individuals. With their blonde hair and fair skin, they looked like they were from Northern Europe, though they were too tall even for people from those parts. At about 8 feet tall, they were clad in tight blue suits of a strange design. In the light of the expedition leader's electric lantern, their brilliant blue eyes were unmistakable. They remained silent as the expedition leader conversed with them, gesturing as he usually does. I never saw the strangers speak, leaving me clueless about the meeting's purpose. After a brief encounter, we returned to the base and they departed. The expedition leader insisted on secrecy. We officially reported a radar glitch, though the operator disagreed. The following day, expeditions to the valley were halted. That night, I received an email from our capital city instructing secrecy and readiness for any potential threat. The next day, a large American naval helicopter arrived unannounced, with heavily armed personnel, sparking concern about their intentions. Our nation is neither allied with nor an enemy of the U.S., so it was surprising when we were instructed to arm ourselves. I equipped myself and the other security personnel with combat rifles and other weaponry. Despite our preparations, we were no match for the armed Americans. Our expedition leader advised us to stay in the background during the encounter, walking behind him and the chief science officer. The American delegation met with our leaders at the helipad, while we followed at a distance, as instructed. The Americans were led by their commanding officer and a mysterious man in civilian attire, both walking well ahead of their security detail. Seeing their 8 Marines made me very uneasy, as it seemed like a small invasion force. Our entire Antarctic station staff, mostly scientists, was only slightly larger than the American group. With just 2 security personnel, we were utterly outnumbered. Yet, our intention was a peaceful engagement. I observed a peculiar sight among the Americans, something I can only describe as a non-human figure, reminiscent of the stereotypical gray aliens from popular culture. It was initially walking behind the Marines, and the reason we did not spot it at first. That sight unsettled us. This being, about 4 feet tall with a large head and huge black eyes, stood in the background with their security staff while their commanding officer and the civilian man conferred with our expedition leader. Despite witnessing many unusual events, this encounter stood out. The tension was palpable as our expedition leader and the American leaders interacted, though I couldn't discern their conversation. There was a lot of gesturing and what seemed like shouting going on. Eventually, the strange being approached the American leader, touching his hand. The moment that happened, the Americans immediately turned around, all together, seemingly without any greeting, got on their helicopter, and left. I remain in the dark about the open-air meeting. It felt like a tense standoff, and we were bound by secrecy. Following a tele-debrief with our HQ, I was instructed to stay vigilant, especially regarding American activity, and to bar them from the base under any circumstances. Upon returning home, I found the entire experience unsettling. I still have lingering questions about its purpose and my role. Despite this, perhaps my specialized security skills were the main reason for my deployment, ready for any unforeseen circumstances. Everything else is a mystery. My experiences on that strange continent will forever puzzle me. Regards, Joe X. Story 5. It was the 70s. I was just a kid, only 12 years old, tagging along with my younger sister and our parents on a rural road north of Adelaide in South Australia. It was a lazy Sunday evening, and we were heading back to Adelaide after spending the weekend visiting family on a farm. To make the long drive more bearable, we had the radio playing in the background. It was Mom who first spotted it, 3 lights hovering out on the plain. She casually remarked, "I wonder where those folks are going," and we all glanced over, mildly interested. At first, we thought they might be cars driving along a farm road, but then, out of nowhere, one of the lights shot straight up into the sky. Dad couldn't help but blurt out the F word, and all 4 of us were left staring in amazement at the unexpected spectacle. Of course, Mom scolded Dad for cussing, though she was equally surprised. Despite the strangeness of it all, we weren't exactly scared. After all, the lights seemed distant enough not to pose any immediate threat. Dad speculated that it might be the Air Force conducting experiments in collaboration with the Americans. Australia has long been allied with the USA militarily, so it wouldn't be surprising if it were some sort of experimental secret vehicle. After all, no known airplane could accelerate so rapidly, he reasoned. As we continued our drive, we couldn't help but keep our eyes fixed on those lights, fascinated by the spectacle. This carried on for a few minutes. Though the lights seemed far in the distance, it almost appeared like it was matching our speed and direction. Then, without warning, all 3 of them shot off at incredible speed in different directions and vanished into the night sky. It was a truly bizarre sight that left us all puzzled. As we left the plains behind and entered a more hilly area, the road wound its way between these low hills. and that's when things took a strange turn. Approaching a bend, Dad pointed out a glow emanating from around the curve. Suddenly, the radio started crackling and then completely lost its signal. As we rounded the bend, we were met with the most otherworldly sight. In front of us, hovering over the road, was a stationary disc-shaped craft. It gleamed metallic under the glow of various white lights. We were in awe, but also shocked. What chilled us to the bone was what lay beneath it. A car, motionless on the road, bathed in the craft's eerie beam of light. The craft itself appeared to be about 100 feet above the ground, its diameter spanning roughly 200 feet, according to Dad's later estimate. We were about 200 meters away from the scene. At that very moment, our car seemed to lose power. We came to a standstill as the engine simply died on us. Through the stillness, we could make out the heads of the people inside the car under the craft. That image is seared into my memory like it happened just yesterday. The vehicle, a light blue Holden Kingswood, stood like it was captured. I was terrified. As if what we witnessed wasn't already eerie enough, it took an even more bizarre turn. The beam of light from the craft intensified, and suddenly, the Holden was lifted off the ground, hovering about 20 feet in the air. I can still hear Mom's panicked pleas for Dad to get us out of there, and Dad's frantic attempts to start the engine, but the car remained powerless. The starter refused to kick in. Just when we thought it couldn't get any more horrifying, another one of those crafts appeared, hovering directly over our car. And that's where our memory of that strange evening ends. Not one of us can recall anything beyond that point until the next morning. I remember waking up in the car as the morning sun rose, casting its early light over the horizon. Our car and the Holden in front of us were neatly parked on the side of the road. The occupants of the other vehicles seemed to wake up at the exact same time as us. We all stepped out of our vehicles and the family of 5 looked surprised to see another car and family there. All they could recall was the sudden appearance of the light, their car's engine dying and nothing more, exactly like what happened to us soon after. Though I believe they were there quite a while before us, as we never saw their car ahead of us during our long drive up to that point. Everyone was highly disturbed, but the two families found solace in each other's company, instantly bonding over the shared experience. They were from Adelaide too, which made it easier to stay in touch. Eventually, my dad and theirs decided to keep the story from the press to protect their careers and families. My dad, a local doctor, and theirs, with a senior job in the bank, knew that going public might risk their credibility. They seriously considered going to the cops, but ultimately decided against it. Dad said the event was so surreal and unbelievable that the police would likely not believe them, and even if they did, there was nothing the cops could do anyway. Besides, except for being somewhat shaken by the events, it wasn't like any of us had any signs of trauma or injury. So the experience remained a secret between our two families. As for what happened after we lost consciousness that night, it remains a mystery, as none of us has ever had any recollection beyond that point. Story 6. We received the following account from a family who embarked on a remarkable journey in the Pacific Ocean. Here it is. Hi, allow me to introduce us. I will use the name Colette for the purpose of this letter. My husband is a plastic surgeon. I am an art teacher and our son is an engineering student. We are French nationals, and as a family, we made the exciting decision to take a year-long hiatus from our customary routines to embark on a sailing adventure through the French Polynesian islands and the Indonesian archipelago with a 55-foot yacht we had rented. As seasoned mariners, or boaties as some might call us, we set out on the morning of December 25th, Christmas Day, in Bora Bora. Our goal was to sail eastwards and explore the rest of the captivating French Polynesian islands. Filled with excitement, we eagerly anticipated immersing ourselves in the diverse cultures and breathtaking landscapes of these exotic destinations. The journey commenced promptly at 11 a.m. that morning as we gracefully sailed out of the marina. The tropical day enveloped us in warmth, occasionally interrupted by refreshing rain showers. It was when we found ourselves approximately 20 kilometers east of Bora Bora that our inexplicable encounter began. We did not at all expect to have an otherworldly experience. We were relaxed and relishing every moment in the tropics. It was an idyllic moment until we noticed something that defied all logic, an object resembling the infamous Tic Tac UFO, the very same phenomenon that had been spotted by the U.S. Navy many times and which has become a political debate in that country after revelations of these sightings. This unidentified flying object was anything but ordinary. It moved in a strange, erratic pattern as if purposefully attempting to draw our attention. It executed maneuvers at speeds that defied the laws of physics, leaving us utterly perplexed and in awe. It was a moment that marked the beginning of an incredible journey into the unknown. Very soon, this strange object closed in on our yacht, leaving us all in a state of both awe and shock. In a matter of moments, it was hovering right beside us, mere meters away, and merely a couple of meters above the water's surface. It presented a pristine white exterior with a subtle sheen, and while it appeared seamless, every so often, lines of light would ripple across its surface, casting an ethereal glow. It emitted a barely audible, high-pitched electric hum that resonated through the air. As we grappled with the sight of this extraordinary vessel, I, Colette, made an astonishing discovery. There was a figure, a person on our foredeck. There she was, a real person or being, standing on the foredeck looking towards us. It was a female, though, unlike anything we had ever encountered before. She was exceptionally tall, easily reaching a height of 8 feet, with an otherworldly appearance. Her skin was an eerie, pale white, and she possessed long, flowing hair of the same hue, cascading loosely around her. Yet, her most striking feature was her unusually large, almond-shaped eyes in a brilliant shade of blue. It was as if we were gazing upon a being from another realm. She was adorned in a flowing white robe that added to the surrealness of the encounter. I was frightened. The question that immediately consumed me was, how had she appeared there? We had witnessed no one exiting the craft, and the sheer astonishment threatened to overwhelm me entirely. My eyes widened in disbelief, struggling to comprehend the inexplicable events unfolding before us. It was beyond surreal. Next to us hovers this strange craft, and simultaneously there is this otherworldly being on our very own yacht. Imagine how bizarre a moment that was. The enigmatic figure stood at the bow, her gaze fixated upon us. It wasn't long before my husband also noticed my redirected attention, and he too bore witness to her presence. In that crucial moment, all three of us shared a profound telepathic message from her. We embrace you in peace and love. Be calm and join us. It was as if her words transcended spoken language, resonating directly within our minds. It had a profound hypnotic-like effect on us. I could feel my heart rate dropping and calm descending over my entire being. She then introduced herself as Talmi. At least that is what I remember. My son and husband have no recollection of her name. From that point onward, our recollections of the events that unfolded diverged into unique and individual experiences. While some memories remained shared among us, others took on varying degrees of clarity. The sequence of events slipped through our grasp, shrouded in a hypnotic or trance-like state. Certain details appeared blurred, almost dreamlike, while others retained a vividness that still feels like they had occurred mere moments ago. The inexplicable nature of our encounter had transported us into a realm beyond our comprehension, where time and reality seemed to meld and blur in profound ways. My son's recollection centers on our entry into the craft, an event shrouded in mystery. His memories of its interior are somewhat vague, yet he recalls an empty white space, dominated by two parallel benches, facing each other. He recalls no crew, no controls, or anyone steering the craft. He mentioned that though Talmi accompanied us, she was merely a passenger like us. In contrast, some of my memories are vivid and etched into my consciousness. Our hostess guided us on a remarkable journey through an underground city or base, concealed within a massive mountain beneath the ocean's depths. That is how she explained our location. She mentioned that though our trip apparently took no more than a minute, we were thousands of miles away from where our yacht was. Even my son, who vaguely remembers the inside of the craft, has no recollection of how we entered the base. It's essential to note that all of Talmi's interactions with us occurred telepathically, a mode of communication that defied conventional speech. The alien base was housed within a labyrinth of very large tunnels that opened on communal spaces and a variety of other venues and living quarters. The colony was adorned with a remarkable array of trees and other natural features that thrived in an environment illuminated by concealed lighting reminiscent of the soft glow found within the cabin of a modern passenger jet. Every aspect of this subterranean colony bore the same characteristic material, an off-white, almost pink substance with a matte surface. Organic, flowing lines seemed to define every structure and piece of furniture, creating an atmosphere that was both enchanting and utterly foreign to our human sensibilities. During our time within the confines of this extraordinary underground city, we encountered many individuals belonging to the same enigmatic species as our hostess. However, they maintained a respectful distance from us, observing us with what seemed like a gentle curiosity. Only once did we catch sight of their children, an unusual sight that naturally piqued my maternal instincts. As both a mother and an educator, I felt an instinctual desire to approach these young ones, perhaps with the intent to engage in some form of interaction or exchange of knowledge. However, Talmi swiftly dissuaded me from doing so. It became evident that they were intentionally keeping the children away from us, and our hostess's unspoken message was clear. There were boundaries and limitations to the interaction we were allowed to have during our brief stay in their realm. My husband, being ever the pragmatic and responsible one, couldn't help but voice his concern about our yacht during this extraordinary encounter. However, Talmi, in her calming presence, assured him that our vessel was well taken care of and would be waiting for us in the same condition when we returned. With this reassurance, he was able to set aside his immediate worries about the yacht. Naturally, he was inquisitive and sought answers to some of the most pressing questions that were undoubtedly on our minds. He wanted to know the purpose of our visit and the origins of our enigmatic hosts. To the former, our hostess provided a response that was as perplexing as it was cryptic. She explained that our experience was merely the beginning, part of a subtle process aimed at integrating their presence into our awareness. It seemed they were orchestrating a gentle introduction, allowing select individuals to glimpse their reality. However, she made it clear that they are in no rush with this project. She said whether it takes 50 years or 5,000 years, it is entirely up to us. Since their civilization has been visiting our world for a very long time, they are patient. They have seen us growing up, but we have much further to go. Yet, when it came to the question of their origin, her response was laden with ambiguity, leaving us with more questions than answers. François described her words as a paradoxical blend, claiming that she conveyed both that they were not from our world and that they were intricately connected to it. It was a contradiction that baffled us, and we struggled to decipher its meaning. Despite his persistence, the conversation seemed to loop in circles, never quite providing the clarity he sought. What made it more interesting was that she later mentioned they do have a homeworld in another star system. We found it all very confusing, though very interesting. Adding to the enigma, our hostess mentioned that we as humans were also from here, but not from here. The ambiguity persisted, casting doubt on the true nature of our existence. As for their mission on our world, it was to keep an eye. She refused to elaborate any further on that. She shared images that vividly portrayed our planet's most destructive capabilities, our nuclear arsenals, and the perpetual specter of war that loomed over humanity. Their concern for our species was evident, and it was a concern that resonated deeply with my husband, as it did with all of us during our inexplicable encounter. Our hostess, through her telepathic communication, didn't shy away from expressing a stark perspective. She stressed that certain concerns that humans often place great importance on, particularly one specific issue that I won't delve into here due to its controversial nature, held little significance in their view. Instead of fixating on these less crucial matters, we should redirect our attention to a far more pressing concern: the nefarious influence wielded by a powerful group of individuals who held sway over our world's affairs. According to her, this influential cadre of humans did not have our best interests, nor those of our planet at heart, even though they pretend they do. She made it clear she will not give us false hope because they are not going to solve our problems for us. We have to do it ourselves. We are on our own until we let go of our destructive ways. Curious and eager to understand more about their society, I inquired about the most significant difference between their way of life and ours. Our hostess's response was nothing short of enlightening. She explained that their society had transcended the turmoil of war and serious conflicts, and even mild interpersonal disputes were exceptionally rare occurrences. The key, she conveyed, lay in their ability to telepathically connect with one another. Through this profound connection, they experienced not only their own emotions but also the emotions of those around them. This empathic link made them acutely aware of the pain and suffering of others, fostering a deep sense of compassion and empathy that deterred them from causing harm. When I pressed further about the nature of telepathy, our hostess elucidated that it was an ability that evolved through spiritual practice and growth. She made it clear that any artificial attempts to access people's thoughts or feelings will only lead to suffering and must never be attempted. She proposed that the most effective way for humans to counter their internal threats is through elevated spiritual awareness. According to her, the majority of us are unable to perceive the truth, and she emphasized the need for us to open our eyes. She mentioned that she chose our family because we see the world as the majority does. I must admit that some of the information she shared was profoundly enlightening and, at the same time, unsettling. It took us some time to come to terms with the fact that our entire worldview was flawed. This adjustment was particularly challenging for our son, as it set him apart from the beliefs of his friends. There were many more details she shared with us, but I'm hesitant to put them in writing. As an art teacher, I couldn't help but inquire about the lack of traditional art or decorations in their physical spaces, aside from plants and water features. She explained that they have fundamentally different interpretations of art and aesthetics. To illustrate this, she shared a telepathic image of their art with me. However, it was utterly incomprehensible to my human mind. I don't even know how to explain what I saw. She clarified that their art exists on a purely conscious level, and at a level of abstraction beyond the mental capacity of humans. Throughout the entire experience, she exuded friendliness and radiated an aura of calmness and caring towards us. We never felt threatened during our encounter. I distinctly recall us being led to a room as they gradually dimmed the lights in the colony. It was a space designed for rest, featuring 3 beds of similar soothing organic shapes found in everything else throughout their environment. Given what we experienced and the environment we found ourselves in, it was unimaginable that we would be able to sleep. Yet, I remember each one of us sitting down on a bed and Talmi saying, "Sleep well," and that is where our recollection of the encounter ends. Waking up the next morning was almost as much a shock as when we encountered Talmi the first time. When we awakened, we found ourselves in our beds in our yacht, as if nothing strange had happened. I never thought I'd find it disturbing to wake up in my own bed. I understand that our story may sound unbelievably surreal, as it does even for us. The profound impact of this experience has left an indelible mark on our lives. While my son rarely speaks about it, the transformation in him is evident. He has become more grounded, and our values as a family have undergone a significant shift. My husband and I frequently discuss the event, but until now, we've only shared it with our closest friends. We feel that platforms like this one provide the opportunity to share our story as our hostess may have intended. While we're open to sharing our experience, we prefer not to be publicly identified. However, there is another profoundly unsettling aspect of this entire ordeal that I've deliberately saved for last. When we ascended to the deck the morning after our alien encounter and found ourselves back on the yacht, we were met with a shocking revelation. Our yacht was moored in the exact same berthing space where we had left it on the morning of the 25th, before our inexplicable experience. It was as though we had never left the marina. What made this revelation even more disturbing was when my husband powered up his laptop. The clock displayed 8 a.m. on the very morning of the 25th of December, Christmas morning. It was precisely 3 hours before our scheduled departure time on a day that had already transpired, not to mention all the strange adventures that had followed. We were utterly bewildered. All 3 of us remembered the sequence of events, and all 3 of us were firmly convinced that we had been away for approximately 36 hours, a reality corroborated by my husband's wristwatch. It was as if everything I've shared with you in this letter had never occurred, yet all 3 of us remain resolutely convinced that it did indeed happen. This single confounding aspect of our experience left us deeply disturbed. In response, we decided to abandon our planned journey eastwards to the French Polynesian islands. Instead, we charted a course in a southwesterly direction, heading towards the Indonesian archipelago, seeking solace and answers in new horizons. Sincerely, Colette. Thank you for watching this exceptional episode. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible content. Please share your thoughts and let us know which story captivated you the most. See you in the next episode.